everyone, and welcome to our gearing, set, and substats guide. We're going to go through the basics up to the specifics of substats in this video. So if you want to look in the description below, there will be timestamps to each section. So first off, there are 5 rarities of gear. Normal and green gear, which you'll usually just use as scraps. Rare gear, which you might use early on in the game, that has 2 really weak set bonuses, but you'll mostly be scrapping this gear. Epic, which is used early game, you may enhance it, but it only enhances up to +9. It has some good set bonuses, with Sages being 10% attack and crit, and Golden Knight being 10% evasion and HP. So it's a pretty good early onset, and then the ones we'll be mainly focusing on here are the legendary gear, which is the end game gear, which can be enhanced to +12, and you can only find accessories as legendary gear. So we're gonna take a look at the non-elite sets first, and they drop off specific bosses. The elite sets drop off of all the bosses, but at a lower chance rate. The first one we're going to take a look at is the Great Spirit set, which drops from the tree boss. This is your main standard DPSer set, and it can also be good in PvP. The 3-piece gives you a 10% attack speed buff for 2 turns when you land a crit. This can be easily procced if an enemy is paralyzed. The 6-piece bonus is a 15% chance to grant an extra turn, which can proc off itself, although this doesn't move your overall turn forward in the turn gauge. This set excels when you can capitalize on a paralyze for that 100% crit, or if your character has innately high crit, like Baldur with his fire mechanics and Arslan with his attack boost mechanics, where he gets bonus crit based off of if he has more attack than the opponent. Multi-hit characters will also help with this, as you have multiple times to proc the 3-piece bonus. This set can go pretty well for any single target encounter, especially when the target is paralyzed. The increased attack speed and the proc of extra turn can also throw a wrench in many people's PvP plans, so it's not really a bad option. This set really goes great on any DPS with multi-hit or high crit, but can also be worked into any DPS in general. It can be mixed with something like the BJ set to help for really quick wave clear, but in my opinion it's best just used on its own with the 6-piece bonus. It can also be mixed in a rotation with a 3-piece of the full moon set to have really quick CC rotations on paralyzed mobs, aka Chloe or any other champion that can paralyze at will. The second set that we're going to talk about is the BJ set that drops off of Proto. This is your main farming set and can also be used for some PvP, Rift, PvE content in general, especially when the target cannot be paralyzed. It'll help with those crits. The first set bonus is a 50% crit power for 2 turns when defeating an enemy. And the 6-piece bonus is 30% crit rate when attacking a weakened enemy. This set only becomes really good for bosses when they're immune to paralyze and you have a weakening debuff applied to them. This set in general makes your AoE wave clear insane, as it has really amazing bonuses for clearing stages like Dimensional Rift. As crit rate and crit power are hard to come by, this set is a really good option if, like I said, they're either a wave clear or immune to paralyze. Some champions who can really take full advantage of the wave clearing potential are Reeve and Baldur, and you can support them with someone like Arslan using AoE paralyze and weakening debuff at the start of the fight. It can be mixed with almost any set, but it doesn't really perform as well as you'd think, and it's best just used on its own. The next set we're going to talk about is the debuffer set Full Moon. This drops off AMA boss, and it's great for PvP and PvE. It's an optimal set for a debuffer. The 3 set piece bonus actually reduces the chance to be resisted when you cast a debuff. And then the 6 piece bonus is a 50% chance to reflect a debuff to the caster of the debuff. So it's really good for PvP scenarios, the 6 set. It's phenomenal for heroes like Reyna and Chloe, who have hard CCs to lock down your opponents. The 6 piece can really screw up any arena team if you get the reflect going. And for PvE, I'm not really sure if it would be as useful, because I'm not sure whether it would absorb the full thing or just reflect the status effect back. I'd recommend Chloe, Reyna, or any other CC'er to be outfitted with this set. I would consider mixing this set with the Tree Spirit for PvE DPS if you're using a lockdown like Chloe. Or if you're looking for some more survival, I'd pair it up with Forgotten Hero, Ulysses for that extra survive, or possibly the Corrupt set for soul generation. Now the next set is going to be our first of 2 damage reduction sets. It's called Ulysses, and it drops off of Iscariot, and it's great for PvP and PvE. The 3 set piece bonus gives you 100% increased physical defense and magic defense when hit by a crit. The 6 piece is a 50% chance to cause despair on an attacker for 2 turns. Increase in survivability this set provides is phenomenal. Not only do you get the 100% physical and magic defense buff on crit, but you also are able to place a despair on your opponent, which can be extremely helpful in PvP. I recommend this set on pretty much any soaker or healer. The Ulysses set pairs exceptionally well with 3 set pieces like the Forgotten Hero. If you want to use the full set, I'd recommend putting it on a tank like Farron or Scotty, as you can make the most out of the 6 set piece bonus of Despair. Some other mixes of this include with the Discipline set for the extra shield and the Corrupt set for that soul generation. Our next set is the Forgotten Hero. This is another damage reduction set, much like the Ulysses, and is great for PvP and PvE. The 3 set piece bonus reduces damage taken by 20% while buff is active, and the 6 set piece bonus increases the effective tolerance to 3 levels at a time rather than 1. This set is great when placed on characters like Owen, who have a permanent self buff, or when placed in a team where you know you're going to have 100% uptime on buffs. The 20% damage reduction is huge, and the 6 piece of tolerance makes it so that you can have a 30% chance resistance increase every time you get hit by a CC or negative effect rather than a 10% regular. In a lot of content, this can make or break your game. I recommend this set for characters like Owen, or if you have Weiwei in the team, as they're great at keeping either buffs on themselves permanently or buffing the entire team. With the possible upcoming change to the Discipline set, making it every odd turn, you'll be seeing this set placed a lot with the Discipline set to have that first turn shield. Current common uses of this are the Ulysses and the Forgotten Hero set, and the Desert Emperor and the Forgotten Hero set. Now to cover our last of the standard non-elite sets, the Desert Emperor set. This set drops off of the Pharaoh boss, and it's good for PvE and pretty good when mixed with other sets for PvP. The 3 piece increases healing to allies by 15% for those who have buffs, and then the 6 piece bonus increases critical chance of healing by 15%. The 3 piece set bonus on the set is great and far outshines the 6-piece bonus in my opinion. Pairing this with Forgotten Heroes, Ulysses, Discipline, Elune can give you a little bit of extra survivability, which can outshine the 6-piece bonus for most situations you're going to use this in. This set is still good with the 6-piece bonus in PvE content, but depending on how the hero benefits from crit, could move up and down the list of recommendations. As barriers can't crit, the set piece bonus isn't very helpful for heroes that have barriers. My recommendation would be to put this set in any healer in general, whether it be a 3-piece on Freya or possibly a 6-piece on a hero like Ulysses if it actually affects her normal attack. For mixing, if you need more survive, I'd choose the Forgotten Hero or Ulysses mix. And Discipline if you don't have that many buffs and you need a little bit of extra survivability. Another option would be to mix it with the Tree Spirit, but that would only be for a hero like Ulysses, who's actually attacking the target to heal. Now the last sets I'm going to talk about are the elite sets, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on them as they're looking like they're getting some changes shortly. They're the only sets that have level 75 gear. The Corrupt is going to be changed to even turns and the Discipline to odd turns. Right now in the current meta, the corruption is huge because you can get a first turn stun on Reyna for 3 turns. But with the changes upcoming, you can see that you won't be able to do that anymore, and you also have the Discipline set to give the first turn shields on characters. So it's a little bit of slowdown of the current PvP meta, as you can just get first turn stun locked and killed very easily right now. So in my opinion, it's a good change overall, and I'm looking forward to the change. Now that we've covered the sets, let's go over substats. For substats, we're going to first do a quick overview of each of the substats, and then we're going to go over some of my testing and finding for the substats to take a look at how each of them scales and pans up against each other. Remember that when you're looking through all this data, it's not meant to be exact, but it's a representation of the approximate value of each substat when comparing it to others at max level gearing, and it should give you a good idea of what will be of value to you. So for the quick interview, let's first go over the substats available. So first is attack speed. Attack speed determines the order of your attack. It's pretty straightforward. There's no RNG of plus minus in this game, so if you have more attack speed, you go first, unless you have mechanically something like Stella, who circumvents that. So number 2 is accuracy. This is your % chance to hit an opponent. It's going to work against stuff like evasion, so it's a pretty important stat. Just keep that in mind. Evasion is the % chance to evade an attack, and evading in this game is 100% nullification of an attack. So evasion is very powerful in this game. The next is crit, and it's just the percentage you have to crit. It can be modified by other abilities like Boulder as this flame, Arslan as this passive. Paralyzed targets are crit at 100% rate, so crit can be useful and it can be not so useful depending on the situation. Crit power is the damage that crits do. The base starts at 150% and just goes up from there. If you have an ability like a Paralyze that makes you do 100% crit, then crit power is going to scale extremely well for any of those encounters. Crit resistance is the chance that you'll have to not take a crit. So let's say they have 10% chance to crit. If you have crit resistance of 2.2%, then they have 7.8% chance to crit. So it just reduces the chance for an enemy to inflict a critical hit on you. The next we have is all of the status ailments, resistances. So we have weakness resistance, physical resistance, curse resistance, nature resistance, spell resistance. In the current meta, the most important one is the physical resistance, because it's resistance against abilities like stun and paralyze, which are very prevalent in the current meta of the game for PvP. But let's say we had a really strong debuffer who did minus 70% attack speed, minus 70% defense, minus 70% attack as an AoE debuff, then weaken resistance might become the next big thing in the meta. So it's just something to keep in mind. Same with if there's someone who could AoE seal someone, you might want spell resistance. So just when you're looking at your items, don't throw away the ones that have spell resistance really high or anything like that, because it could be useful in the future. Now, time for the fun part. All the testing I did with gear. So on the left here, you're going to see this is a boulder with 0 gear, level 40, and this is a boulder with fully geared, level 40. So what I did is I took the example of an ungeared boulder and compared it to a geared boulder. And based on the increase in each of these stats, I came up with a value of how much percentage each stat would raise per point of stat. So how much would 1 accuracy give, how much would 1 evasion give, how much would 1 P-res give, how much would 1 crit res give, how much would 1 crit power give. So I did all the math and came up with that. So from that math, what I did was I took all my gear that I had, and I'm not going to have every range here, but I took the minimum value and I took the maximum value of them. And I put them into this sheet. Rings weren't included because it seems they're about 3 times the value of 1 substat. And I calculated the minimum value that one of these gave and the percentage based on this math earlier, and I calculated the maximum value based off the percentage of the calculation earlier. And then I also looked at the variance, how big of a difference there was between top end and bottom end for my gear. So for the first one, for accuracy, it looks like you go from about 1.6% increase for 1 substat to about 2.2% increase. So there's about 76% of the value on a minimum as there was for a maximum. So it looks like from the beginning, from what I'm seeing, is we're not going to see these huge quadrupled values like we see in some other mobile games like Epic 7, where you could get like a 1 speed or a 4 speed. This seems to be much more controlled, so that you don't enhance a gear and are like, oh, I got like 1 crit on it, I'm just gonna throw it away. I got 1 speed, may as well just, turf this item. Doesn't look like there's any of that. You can still have a useful item even if it doesn't have the best rolls. So second evasion, looks like we have about 1.4% on 1 enhance that I did. That was very bottom end, 16. And then I had a 1 of 25, which was almost 2.2% for that 1 enhance. So there's quite a big variance here. The biggest I found on my gear, which was 64% of the maximum value was what my minimum roll was. Similar as we can see with crit and crit power. So to put that in perspective, for if you're trying to max any of these stats, like let's say you want as much crit power as possible. So looks like you can get about 3.1% on 1 enhance. So you have 16 enhances, not including your rings, because rings give about 3 times. So if you have 16 times 3.1, that'd be around 50% extra crit power. So if you rolled like all perfect crit power, you could get an increase of about 25% of your overall damage if you're critting all the time. So substats can make a difference, but like crypt or crypt power isn't going to completely kill or raise your hero based on like DPS percentages. So that's good that the gear's impactful, but not too strong, it looks like. The one thing that I noticed though is when you get into like status reses, you can see that we have a value of 6.4% minimum and 9.4% maximum. So it looks like we could make ourselves pretty much immune to a status ailment if we rolled it all into here. And like, even if a person gemmed for debuff, if you had the right resistances, you could pretty much just be immune and ignore it. So that's something to pay a lot of attention to also, is that if the meta shifts towards something like we see now, where there's a Reyna where they run just the AoE stun, if you had a status res, you could make yourself pretty much immune to the effect. So something to keep in mind. The other things I calculated were flats, and the way I did this was I calculated against a 6-star Arslan max ascended, but no gear, just to kind of give a ballpark of how much increase there is. And what we saw was that in HP here, even though Arslan's one of the lowest HP heroes, we were barely getting a gain here. So like 1 HP roll would be like 1% of your HP. And the max roll here would be like 1.1%. So HP rolls don't look to be that good, to be honest. And then we have attack rolls up next. So in attack, we actually saw, even though Arslan's the second highest attack in the game, we saw a huge increase here. We saw a 2.9%. Granted, that isn't including the weapon and offhand, which add about 3,000 attack, but this is a max level Arslan we're talking about here. So 2.9% minimum and 3.4% max. So there's also a very small variance into what I saw in my gear, and it was quite a big boost. So attack speed, didn't really worry about that. You know, everyone knows attack speed's great. You know, its perceived value can be a lot more or less than it actually is, depending on how it works out in your team. So just something to consider. Physical defense and magic defense actually look to be quite good to get them rolling on your gear. Even though I know we get almost an extra 1,000, I think it's like 970 from boots and helmet. But given that it's with a value of 4.5, we still see a 2.4% increase in the minimum value that I saw, and a 3.3% increase on the maximum value I saw. Physical and magical defense can actually be pretty damn good when I'm looking at it. So also, when I looked at my rings, I didn't have a big enough pool to test, but it looks like it's about 3 times the value of what one substat would be. So for spell res, you could see stuff like 360 or around 400 on a ring or something like that. So I think it's 3 times, but someone would have to do a lot of tests. I only got a couple rings to drop, unfortunately, after burning all the bosses several times. If anyone wants to, take this sheet and run with it or reuse it somewhere, please let me know, and just make sure you reference where it came from, and I'm completely fine to share any of this information or any of my knowledge with you. Thanks for watching the whole video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.